As the high-stakes G20 summit kicks off in the Indian capital, all eyes are now on the possibility of a joint declaration. Everyone's waiting to hear and read what will be there in the joint declaration. So far, reports say that the G20 negotiators have failed to arrive at any consensus over the wording of the summit declaration, specifically concerning the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, any possibility of breakthrough lies totally on the two-day leaders' summit. As per news agency Reuters, that has seen the 38-page draft, the document has been reportedly circulated among members. The document leaves a paragraph on geopolitical situation blank. The blank space potentially overshadows agreements on the 75 other paragraphs, which include climate change, cryptocurrencies, and reforms in multilateral development banks. Now, G20 Sherpas were struggling for days to agree on the language, but differences persist. However, India hopes to get Russia on board here. In the absence of an agreement, India will have to issue a chair statement. If such a situation arises, it would mean that G20 will not have a declaration, and this is something which will be happening for the first time in 20 years of these summits. Moreover, Russia is not alone in raising objections. China has also joined the suit in opposing the language around the war in Ukraine, its implications and the need for its resolution. The entire fate of the joint communique rests on a debate over 255 words. Last year, even as Russia-Ukraine war commenced and intensified, the G20 agreed on a joint declaration in Bali. They did come on to a common ground there. India and Indonesia brokered a last-minute bargain to which both Moscow and Beijing agreed. But this year, as India assumed the presidency, the two countries have backtracked from their positions. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is skipping the meeting. He has sent Premier Li Qiang instead, and Russia's Vladimir Putin is also absent. All eyes are now on India's role as an arbitrator. India could press for a joint declaration by avoiding any mention on the Ukraine war whatsoever. How such a proposal bodes with the West will have to be seen. India could also bring the countries to issue a joint declaration containing different paragraphs stating the views of different countries. Further, India could also record agreement and dissent in one paragraph. In a case where any joint statement cannot be agreed upon, India could present an outcome document like it did after the G20 foreign ministers meet. But that would still fall short of a joint declaration. To discuss this further, we are being joined by Ms. Bhaswati Mukherjee, who is a former Indian diplomat. She's right here with us in the WION studios. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. And, I want to start off right away with this joint declaration. There is so much which is being said about it. Let's just take the situation that India doesn't issue one regarding the Ukraine-Russia war. They don't give those 255 words which everyone's been waiting for. What is, what will be the outcome of that? What happens next in case that is what India goes with?
Actually, it's standard diplomatic practice that when you have an intractable issue, in this particular case, so intractable that the permanent members of the Security Council cannot agree to a language, it would be completely unrealistic to expect India to come up with some magic formula which the main principal protagonists are not willing to accept. You have very correctly underlined the three different options. The first option is that at the last minute, like in Bali, with India's friends who have promised to be helpful, we come out with some agreed language. This to me does not seem to be possible because since Bali, the war has gone in a different direction.
Absolutely.
And neither of the two protagonists at this point are willing to accept calls for a peace conference, peace, etc., which would be bound to figure in those 255-word paragraph that you're talking about. What then would be the next? Next is, as you correctly said, you could have a paragraph which said, some said, others said. There the problem would be that the West would say the majority believe that, Russia and China believe otherwise. Russia and China would not want to be singled out. In which case you fall back upon the classic diplomatic solution, which is you issue the declaration without Ukraine, and the chairman issues a statement where he says that in the view of the chair, the majority perspective on the Russia-Ukraine war, we say now, earlier we used to say conflict,
yes.
would appear to be the following, and he would give a paragraph, and then he would add that the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China have disassociated themselves from this text. He would have to say that,
right,
because it would be circulated on that basis. They would agree. This is often done. But what is more important is that the G20 is a gathering of economic, the great world's 20 largest economic powers plus the African Union.
Yes.
And the G20 is not supposed to grapple with intractable political issues. This issue which was brought into Indonesia last year, in fact, the Indonesian presidency made the same point,
right,
that it's not a political declaration. But having got it and having got a consensus in Bali, now the expectation is that India should also do the same. But as I said, the course of the conflict has changed.
Right.
There are many other developments which have happened, and therefore, as the Sherpa said yesterday, he said that we are focusing on developmental issues, economic issues, initiatives that India have brought on the table which have been welcomed by everyone. And if we have such a declaration with the kind of initiatives that we have taken, I don't think anybody will remember that there was a missing paragraph on Ukraine 4 or 5 days after the summit is over.
I mean, there are nearly 75 paragraphs, and still everyone's focus is here on those 255 words, expecting India to, give some kind of a solution or to take some kind of side, which I think everyone is really waiting to see India kind of break away from its non-alignment stance, which it has maintained ever since, and they don't want, they want to see some kind of stance that India takes. Either it will be towards Russia, either will it be towards Ukraine, but
I think that we don't even need 255 words.
Right.
We could put in the paragraph what Prime Minister Modi told President Putin,
yes,
which is this is not the era of war,
yes,
and that the G20 would welcome an end to the war and beginning of negotiation.
If you can talk to us more about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, what it really means and why China has a problem with this. China has a problem with Sanskrit. They have a problem with pretty much everything India is doing. But of course, India is going to move ahead regardless. Talk to us more about what this means.
The Chinese actually, if they were reasonable, they would not have a problem.
Right.
Because the old Chinese scholars came to India centuries ago and learned Sanskrit here and went back. Fahen, etc.
Yes.
And the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is part of old Confucian thought and ideology. And actually the complete phrase is Udhara Charita Nama Tu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is only for the generous hearted that the world is one family.
For the generous hearted.
And we are the generous hearted nation that brought the African Union into the G20. And it is part of Asian thought and philosophy. So why the Chinese should object to it is really inexplicable to me.
You need to
but
find
they did object
generosity
to it.
in their heart to understand this.
Then it shows that they don't have generosity in their heart.
Absolutely.
They don't regard the world as one family. But I'm told that some amount of pressure on the Chinese have resulted in their softening of opposition on some of the other paragraphs.
Right.
It was not just Ukraine.
Right.
They had objected not just to Ukraine or Vasudhaiva, they had several objections.
Right.
I am told informally that those have been withdrawn now.
Right.
So now the only sticking paragraph is Ukraine.
Right.
And I'm not sure whether the Chinese will go the entire distance as the Russians, because they would not like to be in a situation where the Indian presidency at the end would say the majority have said this, and Russia and China have said this. It puts them in a very embarrassing situation.
Right.
So maybe at the last minute, it's not. It has happened. I have witnessed it in so many international conferences that in the last minute you have, and it won't be 255 words.
It will be much less than that. India needs to formalize
It would be,
its stance.
you need only 90 words. 80 to 90 words.
No, India has stood firm on its stance of inclusivity, and that's exactly where the G20 bloc is headed. That's what it is meant for in the first place, and India has held true to its stance. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am, for your time.
It was a pleasure.
And for coming in to our Beyond Studios with your insights.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.